Welcome back to another episode of the Morning Buzz. Just want to thank our sponsor, Torquay Coffee, who brings us the Morning Buzz every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. And I'm Russell Gahagan, your host from Russell's Fishing Tech. And this morning we got Bill Saiff III on. Bill has a charter fleet in New York on Lake Ontario. How you doing today, Bill?
I'm good, Russell. Thanks for having me on this morning.
Oh, no problem. We're looking forward to this. This should be a fun one. Why don't you kind of give the folks at home maybe that aren't familiar with you sort of a background of, what your business is, what you do for a living, and then, maybe just touch on the YouTube stuff, which we're going to talk a lot about today.
Sure. We run an 8-boat fleet here in Lake Ontario. I have 5 boats that I own, and then I've got several independents that work for us here as well. We're on the eastern end of Lake Ontario, so we're in a region that's very close to the Thousand Islands on the St. Lawrence River. A lot of harbors, bays, shallow water areas, probably more geographic structure than any place else on Lake Ontario. And it's a dynamic fishery here because we've got the ability to do cold water trout and salmon fishing, but we're just as adept at heading into the back bays and the more sheltered waters for, walleye, pike, pickerel, bass, that kind of thing. And we've been doing this for 40 years. And, we got our start in it as Lake Ontario grew in its infancy. My dad was a major player in the industry. He did a program that we syndicated on PBS for nearly 30 years called Rod and Reel that anglers across the United States will be very familiar with. And it spawned interest to literally millions of people coming to Lake Ontario to fish. And with that, we built a burgeoning outfitting service, part of which includes fishing, both blue water and hard water, and it just kind of grew out of control over the years. And we've been in it for 40 years, and it's a family-run operation. And we got a big place here on the shores of Henderson Harbor called the Westview Lodge, and that's where our customers come in and stay with us there, and we do our fishing out of this eastern port.
Awesome. Well, 5 boats is a lot to manage, and then you got a few others, obviously, that you book if you have large groups or just quite a few groups coming in. I had Dumper Dan Charters on a few weeks ago, and he's got multiple boats as well. And we talked a lot about charter fishing in that particular show, but I think today we're going to talk just a lot more about the nuts and bolts of Lake Ontario's salmon and trout fishing. And
Sure.
One of the things I wanted to mention right away is this last year I really grew my YouTube page, Russell's Fishing Tech, and one of the other YouTube pages that I spent some time watching is yours. And I do that because I think you put together some nice information and some nice videos. And I think a lot of people at home will enjoy those. So if you want to maybe talk about, how people can find you on YouTube and sort of why do you do those and what is the purpose behind doing them?
Well, it's a business philosophy for us. One of the things that my dad and I were often fond of saying in seminars and clinics is that we're ambassadors for the fishery first and guides and outfitters second. With a big television background and growing up in a family that was very involved in communications, it was just natural to do that kind of thing. When I was syndicating my own television program, Cabin Country, I did that nationally for 18 years, which was a hunting and shooting sports program. And then I would also produce and co-host Dad's program periodically. So we grew up in that television station atmosphere. Practically every job in the television station that you could do, I had been involved in from the time I was 11 or 12 years of age. So to do those videos, to be in front of the camera, to share our knowledge and what we're doing with other people, that part of it is second nature. To get to the second part of your question, the reason that we do that is because in fishing, for whatever reason, people hold the important things in fishing that determine success on many days. They hold it close to their chest, and it's a closely held secret that they don't want to share with other people for whatever reason. And I don't know. I've been in this long enough, and I'm comfortable enough in my own skin to be able to share that and not worry about whether somebody's going to have an edge up on me. I mean, we're fortunate that we've got a tightly knit group of individuals that shares information and works together, and that helps keep us on the cutting edge of what's going on or what the hot bite is on that particular day. But people still have to go out and they have to put the things that you show them into play. And that can be a daunting task for some people. All we're really doing is we're cutting the learning curve. And if we're going to promote this fishery and we're going to make sure that it's solid and we're going to get the state and federal monies that we need to shepherd these resources and keep them strong, you need utilization. So if anglers come in from Pennsylvania or Ohio or Massachusetts or New Hampshire and they're not successful, they're probably not going to come back. So by sharing that information, cutting the learning curve, it gives them the opportunity to be successful sooner. And consequently, it's better for the fishery. From a business standpoint, for a guy like me, my favorite story, and I tell it all the time in these kinds of interviews, is we were at a trade show many years ago, and an individual walked up to me and he said, I need to ask you a question about fishing on Lake Ontario. I got my own boat. I do this myself. I'm not gonna take a guided trip, but I want to ask you this question. So that question turned into a 30-minute dissertation at a burgeoning trade show where I could have been talking to customers that were maybe ready to hand me, $100 deposit for that trip right then. Well, I had two outfitting groups to the left of me and one to the right. When that gentleman left, they all came over. We were having coffee, and they said, what are you doing? This guy's not going to spend any money with you. Why would you take the time to answer those questions when you could be talking to a customer? And I said, for me, it's about seeing the forest for the trees. That guy's going to come in his own boat. He's going to come to Henderson Harbor. He's going to get on the water. He's going to have a successful day fishing. When he goes back home, he's working in a mill with 100 other guys that are just like him that don't have a boat to come to Lake Ontario. And they're gonna ask him, where did you go? Where did you do that? How did that occur? Can I go? He said, well, I can't take you. I'm a private boater, but here's the guy who can. And that to me is the premise behind the whole YouTube series. Share that information, help people be more successful, and people want to come and take a trip. It's a great promotional tool for us. And if people want to come and learn, I tell people that all the time. Come ask, 64 questions. You want me to teach you how to handle the gear? You want me to explain philosophy? You can watch all the YouTube videos in the world that you want, but you spend 8 hours with somebody on a trip like what we offer, and that cuts the learning curve immensely. And you're buying your way in, and we've been ambassadors for the fisheries for years, and we're happy to show people. And that's really the impetus behind the YouTube channel. We're teachers. We want to share that information. We want people to be more successful because we want the resource to be strong, and we don't want it to ever go away.
Well, I think that's a fantastic way to look at it, and unfortunately, like you said, not everybody does, especially in your business. In the sense of the charter business, there's a lot of people that do hold information close to the chest because they feel like catching fish is the only way they can separate themselves from everyone else. So they feel if they catch more fish, it's an easier promotion for them.
Right.
I disagree with that. I've said for years that, I've spent my entire childhood in the charter business. My dad's been a charter captain for 40. This will be, I think, his 43rd year. Yeah, you got to catch fish. Don't get me wrong. You can't be a terrible fisherman and probably have a successful charter business, but who catches the most every day doesn't win the charter game. And
No,
you
that's
get
for sure.
yeah, and if you're really any good and if you do it any often, you won't catch the most fish every day. I mean, it's just reality. So, and you can see that in being in a 5 and 8 boat group type of thing, and then growing up around the Dumper Dan charter business, who has multiple boats, up to 6 boats. I also understand too that you can't be the top dog every day. It's just not going to happen. So, that's awesome. I'm looking forward to this weekend. I have a salmon school in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I've got 90 some people signed up. I'm going to be doing an in-house teaching, and it just sort of brought me some thoughts while you were talking there about how important it is for people like yourself, myself, and others to share information and get people involved, and that is what will keep our fishery going. At the end of the day, if there isn't enough people buying licenses and stamp money and yada yada, we won't have a Great Lakes salmon and trout fishery X amount of years from now. I mean, if nobody's going fishing, the the DNR and the other people involved won't have any reason to continue to put fish in the lake and continue to manage these fisheries.
Well, and I think on another point, and I probably should interject this at this stage of the game. I don't get on a lot of groups like on social media, and there are some. They're usually my friends groups, and they've asked me to come on and they've asked me to share pertinent information. But through this ice season in particular, I watch those threads, and a novice will come on and will say, can anybody give me information about fishing XYZ spot, or what's the ice thickness, or what's everybody using to be successful on perch out there, or pike, or whatever it is. And these guys on these threads, these keyboard cowboys, they hammer these individuals with, they're ruthless, and they hammer these guys, and they're like, get your ass out on the ice and figure it out for yourself like the rest of us, so on and so forth. And I watch these hunting and fishing forums, and I see it happen in the hunting industry especially, where they're so miserable and they're so divisive that people need to realize that as sportsmen, whatever the walk of life is that we're coming from and whatever our pursuit happens to be, it's no better than the next guy's is. And sharing that information is critical, and it's important. And I'm not saying that you have to give away the farm with everything that you do, but one thing's for sure, in today's day and age, when all types of factors are coming at the hunting and shooting sports and fishing industries that are detrimental, we as sportsmen cannot afford not to be nice to one another, not to be respectful of one another, and not to band together in those public forums, because that unity is what makes what we do prolific. It's what keeps it strong. It's going to be what helps us succeed over the years, and as we move forward and pass this tradition on to the younger people. And if we don't have that ability, then we're in trouble. And I think everybody, as far as sharing information, needs to take a look at that and think about that a little bit, and not just what's good for me personally at that time. I think you got to take a broader spectrum approach to what's going on in the marketplace, and do your part to be good with other people and sportsmen, and band together, because God knows there's enough factors that are trying to divide us. And if we're divided, then there's going to be problems down the road for everybody.
Well, I agree with you 100%. And it's interesting because I think one of the reasons why salmon and trout fishing doesn't maybe see quite the keyboard warrior, as I like to call it, attitude as like walleye and bass fishing is, we do have a pretty big and vast fishery. Obviously, the Lake Michigan fishery is a little bit different than the Lake Ontario fishery, but also very similar. Point being is that these fish move around a lot. They move on a daily basis. They school up, but they're not on the spot. Where when you got walleye and bass fishing, you of course got the spot on the spot type of stuff. People want to protect their spot, protect their area. If you go to their rock pile and catch a fish, you've caught a fish that they feel like they probably would have caught if you weren't there. And obviously you don't have that situation on Lake Michigan or Lake Ontario or Lake Erie for that matter, so to say. There's giant schools of fish in vast areas, and they move from one port to another. They move deeper, they move shallower. So it's sort of nice that in some ways I feel blessed that we have that sort of set up that way, because it does make it for individuals to be a little more willing to share. And it's all a mental thing, because I'm just as willing to share in walleye fishing as I am in salmon fishing, but not everybody is. And I do understand that particular case. So let's talk a little bit about Lake Ontario fishing. So obviously it's getting ready for the open water season for you. Let's run through real quickly when you're going to start and when you're going to end from a charter standpoint. And I know obviously already they're probably catching some brown trout and it's probably just starting to go already, but what's kind of the season for you?
Well, brown trouts are bailiwick. Everybody knows who watches our YouTube channel. I catch a lot of browns and a lot of mega browns, and that was a focus when I was young in this industry, and I wanted to be really good at it. So I've concentrated a lot on brown trout fishing over the years. I'm going to trailer the number 5 boat Monday through Wednesday next week, and then we'll be in the water on the South Shore for the first of April. So typically what happens is, where we're located in Henderson Harbor in the spring of the year, generally in April, prevailing winds are southerly or southwest. So even though as the crow flies, my brown trout lodge in Sodas Point, and I fish my boat out of Pulteneyville, New York. The reason I picked Pulteneyville is it's got a huge store of browns on the shoreline there, but it's 10 miles west to Irondequoit, which is the next population center, and 10 miles east to Sodus, which is the next population center. So I'm in the middle, and that affords me a lot of protection from other fishermen coming in from the outsides. Most people aren't going to run 10 miles to fish browns. They can come out of port, drop a line in the water, and be semi-successful where they are. So the reason we go there is because I know that I can get 30 days of fishing in the month of April while the ice is still going out in Henderson. Even though we're only 67 miles port to port as the crow flies, down on the South Shore, your winds are coming off vineyards and apple orchards, and it's warm next to shore. In Henderson, it's blowing 67 miles across a lake that's got a core temperature of 35 degrees. So even on the nicest days in Henderson, it can be brutally cold. It's climatically, it's like you're on another planet. So 26 years ago, I'm going into my 27th year on the South Shore, I started taking a boat to Peeville and fishing out of there for brown. So we start with that early, and I've got a separate lodge down there for my clients. They stay with me. When we get to about the middle of April, all the boats are in up here. My boys are washing, waxing, getting everything ready. By the third week of April, we're fishing up here with clients, and Dad's running stuff here in the Henderson area, so that works. Along comes the first Saturday in May, and now in addition to the brown trout, we've got pike and walleye opening up. So now customers have that choice. Do we want to fish blue water for lake trout and brown trout, or do we want to fish backwater for pike, pickerel, and walleye? One of the nice things about May into early June in the Eastern Basin, because we have the structure and the bays and all the islands for protection, a lot of those days where it's steaming on Lake Ontario that would kill you on a blue water trip, as long as the customers are amenable, we can drop back in the back bays, handle a lot of fish, handle trophy fish, still have a very successful day and fish comfortably. So from a dynamic standpoint, that's one of the things that I really enjoy about this fishery. That takes us up into the early June, middle of June. Third week in June, bass season comes on. We're fishing kings, out in deep water. We're fishing steelhead. We're fishing browns. We're fishing lake trout in the top 30 feet. people are on the YouTube channel, one of the cool videos that we do is, fishing dinosaur lake trout with spoons. That's one of the things that kind of comes in at the tail end of that mid to third week of June, when those fish start to get down below 50 feet. We start attacking them with big magnum size spoons and catch these, just enormous, some of the biggest lake trout of the season. Here comes late June. Now the early kings are coming in the summer fishery. Really my favorite. I like staging kings. I got no issue with them and what have you, but I'd rather catch a king in the summer on a bare spoon myself personally. I've always been a spoon fisherman, pattern builder, and not that we don't roll flashers and flies in the summer. We do, and with great success. But it's still a little bit different fishery for us. So we call that the hot zone. Last week in June, first 3 weeks in July is what I refer to as the hot zone. And I tell people we call it the hot zone because it's the one time in the year where we have the geographic structure of the shipping lanes on Lake Ontario. So it's a big deep water chasm it holds bait, it's got physical structure, and it's got current and temperature. So we call it the trifecta. It's a very unique place. So while most people are blue water fishing and they're looking like, to your point, where fish are they're transient, they're moving all the time and what have you, generally there is a group of kings that's going to stay in that shipping lane area for around 40 days. So we're going to set up every day within a mile of where we set up the day before for about a 40-day period in the summer. So we are running to a specific spot, but they're going to vary up and down that wall. And are they deeper? Are they shallower? Are they up on the structure? That depends where the current and the temperature pushes those fish. As we get into early August, in my opinion, if there's going to be a hiccup in the fishery on kings, it's going to be in the first 2 weeks of August, usually because the lake's at peak temperature. Also, those fish are moving from their summer haunts to where they're going to set up for staging. And sometimes you lose them. It's a vast area, 25 miles, 30 miles of the Eastern Basin, and you'll lose those fish. And it's not as easy to be successful on a daily basis. But as long as people are happy with targeting, in addition to that, structure browns or maybe giant lake trout, there's still always something to do during that time period. Here comes middle August, mid-August to mid-September, traditional staging period for kings. And, we're talking about helping people. If you got a small boat, a 17-footer, an 18-footer, maybe you can't go out 17 miles, 18 miles in the lake in the middle of the summer, but you can fish them when they're a mile offshore, coming into stage during the fall of the year. So it's always gotten a lot of it's always gotten a lot of ink and press from our outdoor writers and our television people, because it's a pursuit that everybody can be involved in. So that staging period is extremely dynamic, and all the stuff that you and I are into with flashers and flies and all that stuff that we build and that we do and patterns that we come up with, that's the time. I mean, we're crowning them then, and a lot of that stuff is put into play, from our standpoint. Once we get mid-September, late September, trout fishing is going to go till the end. Those kings are going to go into the river. In the early days, we fished them in the river right until the end of October. I don't do that anymore. I shift gears and we go back to pike and big walleye and trophy bass and that kind of thing in the fall. And now, we fish with our customers right until about the 10th of November in open water. So we never did that, and we never did that in the past. And the last couple of years, we've really started doing that. And the volume of trophy fish, but more importantly, the lack of pressure. There are days that we fish in October and November, and you might have a couple bass guys sitting on a shoal, casting or drop shotting or that kind of thing. But as far as seeing another trolling boat or another charter fishing boat, we'll go days and not see another vessel. So that's a huge untapped resource for us, and we're happy to be the first ones in on that, and on the eastern end of Lake Ontario. And I think the outlook for that kind of fishing late in the season is extremely bright.
Well, you have a very diverse fishery there, and that's really cool. I think it adds a little bit of flavor to sort of an uncharacteristic Great Lakes trout and salmon business. So it's unique
Right.
and it's very cool for you. And I'm sure that your customers appreciate that. Sounds like overall your fishery is extremely similar to what we have here in Lake Michigan, or what I have here, I should say, in the Wisconsin side of Lake Michigan. Very similar in the sense that, April is brown trout for us. May is generally lake trout until Memorial Day weekend. Then we start to see some kings. And then it's your standard what I call mixed bag fishery from
Right.
basically Memorial Day weekend to the 1st of August, and then sort of in the same exact boat as you. We catch some kings in early August, but we tend to chase more steelhead and other species, just
Right.
because those kings are heavy on the move. They're not really feeding anymore now. They're really concentrating on spawning until they group up somewhere out in front of the harbor area, whether that be 50 foot of water or right at the pier heads, and we find them there. That fishing gets tough. So Lake Ontario appears to be, from what I can see from the outside, extremely healthy as far as the number of fish in the lake. When I went there and fished for the first time, I think, which is now maybe about 8-9 years ago, something like that, you guys had what I would consider what we're kind of sitting in now. You had maybe a few less kings, but you had bigger kings. Now
Right.
the roles have kind of reversed. Now Lake Michigan is kind of the trophy king fishery today, right now, in the sense of overall giant size. But Lake Ontario, I would say, is probably more of the numbers fishery. Would you agree with that statement, or?
I think it depends. I think it depends where you are. I mean, you have to look at what's going on. I mean, kingfishing's like chasing trophy whitetails. I tell everybody, they're like, "What's the secret to shooting a big deer?" And I said, "Well, you got to be where the big deer are." And the same thing with the kings. I mean, you have to be in a situation where, me personally, I don't want to fish. I don't want to fish kings all season. I don't. If I had to do that every day, I probably wouldn't be a charter captain. I want that diversity. I want things to be dynamic. So, um, uh, as far as numbers are concerned, I mean, if you go if you go to Oak Orchard, Olcott, the Niagara Bar in the spring of the year, I mean, it's not uncommon for those guys to go out and handle, 30, 40 kings, do that kind of thing. Are you going to have days where you catch 30, 40 kings in the Eastern Basin? Uh, yeah, I mean, it'll happen, but it's pretty infrequent. Um, it's just not the same. The volumes that are held by the flow of that Niagara River, and as far as size is concerned, I look back. I've had every picture I've ever taken since we started in 1982, and if you look back at a lot of those pictures that we had in the late 80s through like 1997, 1998, I mean, you can tell those kings that are hanging on the board, physically hanging on the board. I mean, I've got catches where there's a 12 king limit hanging on the board on the docks at Hengens Marina, and four of those fish are over 30 pounds, or five of those fish are over 30 pounds. The big fish might be, 35, 34, 35. So that stuff happened on a fairly regular basis back then. Now, I mean, if you crack the 30-pound mark with a king, I mean, people are talking about it.
Yeah.
Are you still taking a good number of fish in the 25 to 30-pound range? Yeah, absolutely. But I would say, the average king is somewhere in the 17 to 25-pound range. I don't know what things are like out there, but that's kind of what's going on here.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on cue. And it just kind of, so when I first started communicating with guys over there and really selling tackle through my tackle store, and that's when I sort of paid attention to it. It's probably 10 years ago now. We had a lot of discussions in house, just conversational between us buddies and fishermen and employees. We'd see a lot of racks of like 5, 6, 4 kings, and a couple other fish or whatever on a charter rack on Lake Ontario, and that was a good day. But
Right,
like you said, maybe you had 4 or 5 kings, but 2 of them were 25 plus pounds. Okay, and
right,
at that time, 10 years ago, the salmon fishing here in Lake Michigan, we would probably have said a 4 or 5 king day was a average day to slow day. So it was
Right.
just sort of a different mentality. But our fish were 15 to 20 pounds
Right.
with a giant being 25. Now the roles have kind of reversed a little bit. We're getting I would say we're getting record number of 25 plus pound fish year after
Uh-huh.
year for about 3 years now. The most I've seen in my lifetime. And but we're averaging probably 3, 4, 5 kings on a decent day. That's a decent
Right.
to good day. Your random 10 king day, that's your best day of the year almost. So,
Right.
like you said, I have fished that Niagara area. I fished that Wilson tournament. That's a unique area and a really cool place to fish for a semi short period of time.
Right.
And not everywhere on Lake Ontario is going to be like that, but from a promotional standpoint and an excitement standpoint, even so, I think it's probably semi-regular for you when the king fishing's good to have an 8, 10, 12 king bite day.
Yeah.
That's pretty
It is.
regular. Yeah.
It is, but I should make this point. I don't think that's what you have to have um, to satisfy customers. It's funny because we can talk about what makes a good fishery, but then what satisfies customers and what's good for business. Um, we've had years where, holy smokes, 12, 15, 18 kings, snuffed out by 11 o'clock in the morning, and you're rolling back to the dock. The guys are worn out, that kind of thing. When it's that easy, and when it's so good, when it's that easy, number one, people don't have anything to judge it against. Number two, they take the fishery for granted. Number three, I don't think that equates from a business standpoint with people coming back and utilizing your charter service. Um, when it's that easy and the fishing's that good and the fish are that big, um, I think people fully scratch that itch, and then they think about, okay, what's the next mountain I'm going to tackle. When you have to your point, when you have a 4 king, 5 king, 6 king day, but they're quality, you got some skin in the game. You're working to catch those fish. It's not one fish right after the other. It's when the prowess and the professionalism of that charter fishing fleet starts to shine. You know, none of us ever learned anything, Russ, when things were easy. You learn stuff when you're painted into a corner and your back's against the wall. So when the fishing's tough, um, that's when the cream rises to the top. That's when the guys that really work hard and they show their customers something. This charter fishing deal, you can't base it just on fish. You can't. It's about personality. It's about having fun with people. It's about teaching them things. It's about having a good time. I've said for years, you can go out and catch 40 fish and you're miserable while you're out there all day on the boat. People are never going to come back. If you catch 6 fish, but they have fun and they laugh and you tell jokes and you have a good time and you struggle on a tough day, but you struggle together and you work hard together, they love you for that. They're going to come back the next year. They're going to tip you better. They got skin in the game, and they want to have more. They want to have more fun with you. Then when it is a really dynamic day out there, it's like they've got some. It's like they've got some sweat equity into what went on. So we all want the very best fisheries that we possibly can have, but the reality is, and I don't care how good a fishery is, it's not going to be great every single day. And what separates the wheat from the chaff is how guys like you and me handle that situation. Not when it's good. Anybody can do it when it's good. If it was good every day, the women and children would be doing it. And it's how you handle it when the chips are down and things are a little bit rugged.
No, you're 100% on cue, and it's fun to hear that because, you and I have communicated a few times before, but we don't conversate regularly, not about this kind of stuff especially, and
Mm-hmm.
we have the exact same philosophy. A couple quick things on that comment because I think that's so critical. Number one, you're 100% right. If you got in a deer stand for the first time ever in your life and shot a Pope and Young buck, you're probably not going to put your time, effort, and become a diehard whitetail hunter because you're going to take it for granted. You're going to go, wow, every time I get in the stand, I see giant bucks. It doesn't work like that, as you know that, number one. Number two, it's not sustainable. One of my biggest fears about probably one of the premier, fisheries in the country right now is Lake Erie. I mean, everybody I know that goes there basically is catching their limit and having just the best time of their life. Now, while that's awesome, and I think everybody who loves walleyes should take the opportunity to go to Lake Erie right now if they want to experience something of a lifetime, the problem with it is that's not sustainable. And I can say that intelligently only because I've seen it with Lake Michigan, and you've seen it with Lake Ontario. We've seen in the last 40 years peaks and valleys of the lake, and it's not sustainable to have record numbers of fish in the lake and record numbers of fish being caught. Sooner or later, they're going to go through the other end of that spectrum, which is really, really tough fishing. And what happens is, in the meantime, when all these people have gone there and become accustomed to fishing for 3 hours and catching 20 to 30 walleyes, when they go there and fish for 8 hours and catch 6 walleyes, are they going to come back? And that's the tough part.
Well, look at the number of guys in the industry now that are offering 3 hour, 4 hour, 5 hour trips and what have you. And people call me and they ask about what we offer and what we do. And very much our business is built on, and we started this from day one, and I appreciate everybody's business philosophy. And I'm not saying that one's better than another, but over 95% of my business is built on an 8 hour line in the water fishing trip. And I don't sell meat collection, I sell adventure. And that's the name of the game as far as I'm concerned for sustainability. Now, there's guys, and they can be in spots where it's just a short drive out and they drop on the fish and boom, 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 they hammer this. But as soon as that fishery goes away or as soon as it hiccups and it changes, you've ingrained legions of fishermen to a mentality and a thought process, to your point, that's not sustainable. So you've set yourself up for failure. And then they complain about stocking, or they complain about this, they complain about whatever they can blame it on, when it might just be the cyclical nature of the fishery. It might be nothing other than Mother Nature rearing her ugly head, but because you didn't handle your business properly, you're going to pay the price. We had a guy in to pike and walleye fish with us that was a Lake Erie charter captain. And man, when it didn't happen like it happened on his boat in Erie, I mean, when you come here, when a rod tips over in the fall of the year with me, that fish is going to be somewhere in the 7 to 13 pound range, and more than likely it's going to be in the 9.5 or 10 to 13 pound range. I mean, the volume of giant walleyes that we handle like that is incredible. But if you get 5 or 6, that might be, a phenomenal day. There are days that you're going to fish in the fall that you're not going to catch any. But when it wasn't 3 on at a time, 5 on at a time, that kind of thing, he didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to handle it. He couldn't process it. It was a very, very poor trip for him. It was a very poor experience for us. And I couldn't help but thinking as he went away, we still did 110%. We did everything that we could possibly do. But there was no way you were ever going to satisfy that individual. And I was thinking the same thing that you just mentioned. When that fishery turns and that changes, that guy right there, he's going to be one of the first ones out of business, because his ability to process that, he just couldn't do it.
Yeah, no, you're right on cue there. And it's interesting just discussing this because, again, being through the industry and multiple industries, the charter business, the tackle business, he who adapts wins in the end. And,
right.
I can remember for years, certain individuals, when Lake Michigan was a king fishery primarily and Lake Huron was a lake trout fishery, were promoting, kings over lake trout now Lake Michigan's got more lake trout than kings. Now they kind of put their foot in their mouths, or those particular individuals aren't even around anymore because they didn't teach their customers about the diversity of the fishery. They built their entire business around king salmon
One
only.
fish.
Yep, which is not the way to do it. We have a beautiful fishery out here with 5 trout and salmon species that are a ton of fun, and they're all great. So let's talk a little bit hardcore fishing here for a few minutes. Let's talk about something that I tend to promote and talk about a lot, and I know you do as well, which is, sort of what I call building a program, and especially around color. I talk about it a lot and I refer to it as family fishing, meaning I'm going to use an example that I use a lot in seminars, which is a product that we sort of we didn't develop it, but we've expanded it, which is a product called the Stud Series, color combination called the Stud Series, which actually comes from a fly company over in New York. Atomic made the first stud fly, and then I did a custom flasher with Michigan Stinger, and then now we've really branded that in our store brand, the Salmon Candy brand, and it's taken its own mind with multiple versions of it, and it's been just last 2 years it's been a huge producer on both Lake Ontario and Lake Michigan for customers who have been buying product from me. But that to me is just a perfect example of, when the chrome stud, which is the green version's going, then a guy, puts out the blue one, or puts out the Mountain Dew one, or puts out the Lake O one, which is black. Or vice versa, he gets the chrome one going, which is chrome and green, and then he puts out, Meat Market, and he puts out, green jeans, which are, again, chrome and green variations. That's one of the things I really try to teach fishermen about this fishery, is that pattern fishing, family fishing, whatever you want to call it, is so important if you want to go from bringing in 3 or 4 fish to bringing in 8 or 10 fish. Talk about that for a minute, because I know it's something you talk about in your videos, and I know it's something you do on a regular basis.
I'm huge in pattern building. I mean, that's the title on several of our videos. Some of the stuff that's going to be coming up this year, and even if you move out of the salmon realm and you go into the brown trout videos, where I break it down into here's your groupings for clear water spoons, here's your grouping of dirty water spoons, here are your hybrid or your dual purpose spoons that will work, if you're in changeable conditions where you're fishing clear water and then you come into dark water. Same thing with the kings. I mean, I watched these guys for years that were the guys that, throw a little bit of shit into the fan, and then they see what sticks to the wall, and then they try to start their salmon fishing program with that. I'm the guy who's going to go out there, and it's overcast today, and I got 6-inch or a foot chop. I think it's absolute optimal day for catching kings. I show up on the shipping lane wall. I'm going to dump a purple pattern in early July. I'm going to have a Dalmatian spoon down the chute. I'm going to flank it with a black silver. I'm going to put a couple nuclear purples or something like that in on the edge of it, or I'm going to run some kind of a silver or a silver glow flasher with some kind of a purple fly or that kind of thing, and I'll move that in. I'll put it on a winger so that it's separated out to the side, but I'll bring that flasher in at 10 feet or 12 feet behind the ball, so that it's rotating up here on the side. Sometimes early in the season, it'll be too much for a fish, and if I keep it in tight, he doesn't have to swim by that flasher fly combination to get to those spoons. Those spoons might be at 20 or 25, so that king sees that, he feels the thump, he's attracted, he comes in on that flasher fly combination. We're running basically a purple pattern, and he when he gets in there, it's a little too much for him for whatever reason. He can access it from the outside. I try to put it someplace where he can get at that thing and track it and kill it in that solitary scenario. But if he doesn't like it, if it's too much for him and he drops back and he disengages, here's these 3 spoons, and he'll peel off and hit a more diminutive bait, something that's not quite as randy as that flasher fly combination is down there. Here's if I don't like the way that's working, and I don't think that that's on. If I make a change, I'm changing all the way. I'm going to silver and chartreuse, or I'm going to a green pattern, or what have you. When I make a change, more than likely I'm going to change that across the board. The only thing that might be standard and stable in that pattern is maybe whatever the black silver offering is, because that's going to troll well and it's going to match up with any color pattern that you put down there. But then you're going to find other days where those fish want that excitement of that flasher and fly, and building 2 or 3 of those into the pattern is exactly what the doctor ordered. You got to be ready to. If I drop out there early in the season and the first 2-3 strikes of the day are coming on flasher flies, you don't have to hit me over the head too many times with a bat. It's game on. We're gonna switch that pattern over, and we're gonna roll it in that fashion. Where I think the average fisherman goes wrong is they don't think about this in a pattern and how they attract fish in, and how the fish act based on what they see on the sonar, and how they react to that particular pattern. So a guy goes out and he puts, this is my classic example, he puts this particular flasher fly combination down, and all of a sudden he's got 3 different color spoons. He's not paying attention to pattern at all. He's got 3 different colored spoons. Boom, spoon 2 hits. So he says, well, if spoon 2 hit, if I put another one on just like that, I'm going to do twice as good. So he puts 2 on, and all of a sudden, boom, boom, those 2 spoons are hitting. So he thinks, okay, if 2 spoons are working, if I put 3 on, it's going to be 3 times as good. So he pulls the other spoon, boom, boom, boom. Now he's got all 3 of those spoons working, and he says, well, if 3 is good, 4 is going to be better. Now he pulls the flasher fly out of the middle. Everything goes dead. Can't catch a fish. That guy, what he didn't realize was that flasher fly combination might not have caught a fish all day, but that was the key ingredient in the pattern that was bringing those fish into the pattern and into the program. And probably what didn't matter was that particular color spoon. I mean, I'm obviously the first spoon that the fish hit was better than the others, or it wouldn't have isolated in, and it wouldn't have taken that. But he probably could have run a couple different combinations with that flasher fly pattern and had it be successful. But without 40 years of sitting in the chair and knowing how fish react and how they engage or disengage based on the pattern, you don't have the fortitude to make those decisions. Where guys who've been in it a long time, they know when they're building those patterns. They got a lot of trial and tribulation over the years. They know what patterns generally will work, and they can set up with 5 or 6 basic patterns that are going to work every day for salmon fishing and trout fishing on Lake Ontario. And you can start with one of those patterns based on the conditions, and you watch the ebb and flow. The advantage that we have when I got 7 boats or 8 boats on the water on a Saturday is that, we're talking to one another constantly. It's a family operation, so the information is absolutely guaranteed. When I'm talking to a client, I tell them, you're not hiring my expertise for the day. You're hiring the expertise of every person I've got on the water, because if they are catching fish, that information is shared with me. Consequently, everybody in the fleet is going to do better. So when there's a hiccup, or there's a nuance, or there's a slight color change, we find out about that. We find out about that immediately, and we can take advantage of that. But you have to think about things from a pattern standpoint, and what's actually occurring underwater, what's making those fish do the things that they do. If you're not in that mindset, in my opinion, you're really missing the ball on salmon fishing, because to me, pattern building, or your family fishing, what you call it, that's the key.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. It's something that I think is fairly basic. It definitely takes some thinking involved. It takes some thought to figure it out, but it's a fairly basic, and on a lot of days, the example you gave is perfect. It can be a very obvious sort of pointed out by the fish, sort of an obvious thing if you just pay attention a little bit, and it can really increase the average fisherman's catch rate. So one of the unique things I think between Lake Ontario and Lake Michigan at this point, and some of this is a little bit where I'm located maybe versus other places on Lake Michigan, but I feel like in a general statement, Lake Ontario still favors spoons over flashers and flies on the average, where I would
Right.
say at this point, and part of this is probably because of me actually individually as well. Lake Michigan has probably become a 50-50, or maybe even has tipped the point of a little
More
more of
flasher
a
flies.
flasher fly fishery than a spoon fishery at this point. And a lot of that, like I said, is because I have spent the last 20 years of my life, you know, trying to teach people how to fish and help people catch more fish even before I had the store. And I've been a heavy flasher fly fisherman for the last 20 years. So it's interesting to me, and that's why I watch some of your videos, and that's why I just enjoy the experience. It's interesting to me just to hear you talk about, a flasher fly or two flasher flies and then some spoons in the mix, where for me, on an average day, especially if I'm targeting kings, it's, okay, I'm gonna have 9 rods out. It's 7 or 8 flasher flies and maybe a spoon or two to start.
Right.
And then, of course, if the spoons start to go, I put more in and yada yada. But just interesting how that, to me plays out and how it's a little bit different. And I think both fisheries are close enough that spoons and flasher flies work equally, and it's some of it's just what the individuals who are fishing for the fish prefer and promote to some level as well. Would you agree with that, or?
Yeah, and the other point that I would make, and if people don't understand this, so I'm going to clarify it right here, so everyone can hear and everyone can understand where I'm coming from. It's not that I'm lazy. It's not that I don't want to push the envelope. It's not that I don't want to do the same things that other fishermen do, but where our fishery varies from what happens on the South Shore or west in the lake, or maybe from what you guys do, is that very rarely am I out in a situation where I'm just trolling blue water. So if you look at what I show and what I highlight in the Bill Safe Outdoors series, especially when it comes to salmon fishing, you will rarely ever see us running more than 6 rods. And the reason that we don't run more than 6 rods, I'm going to tell you something that's going to blow you away, and I'm sure that people that are watching this are going to say he's got to be absolutely nuts. There is not a single boat in the Safe Charter fleet that owns a copper rod, not one. And the reason that we don't is because of the geographic structure in the eastern end of Lake Ontario. When I put 8 boats on the shipping lane wall in the hot zone in July, there is no room for somebody running a 600 copper or a 500 copper. There's just no room. There's no place to go. It can't be done. If I was coming out of Oswego and I was going 2 miles out and I was setting a straight troll to the west and I was looking for fish and I was fishing nothing but current and temperature, I'd be all over the board. I'd be running an 8 rod pattern. I'd be running a 10 rod, 12 rod pattern, whatever the case may be. I'm turning on a dime. That's why my outside riggers are loaded with wingers, because I'm spreading that pattern. I'm giving those kings a chance to come in. My basic setup is a 4 downrigger pattern and 2 wire dipsies almost every day, because I might be making a quarter-mile run or a half-mile run, and I'm turning on a dime and I'm coming right back into it. For me, it's more about staying on the spot, dialing in exactly where those fish are, and then beating them over the head. I can't beat them over the head when I've got 12 rods in the water. And for me, less is more in 90% of the fishing scenarios that I'm faced with, because um, of the way those fish are in pinpoint areas and the way they're relating to structure. So I have to handle them differently than probably 90% of the salmon fishermen that are in Great Lakes fishing. The other thing is, as I mentioned, running wingers on number 1 and number 4 on the outside and spreading that pattern. I do these clinics, and people come in the Westview, and they say, I've got to run copper, or I've got to do this, or I've got to do that in order to get a king bite. I can't get bit on a downrigger. I don't get that, because I fire all 4 downriggers on a daily basis on kings. But I'll say to them, are you running wingers? Are you spreading the pattern? Are you doing that kind of thing? What's a winger? You get out of Henderson Harbor, you go west as far as Oswego, which is only 40 minutes away, and they look at you like you got 3 heads. They don't know what you're talking about. Where if I had to go out and fish without one of those wingers and without spreading that downrigger pattern on the outside, I would feel like I was fishing with one hand tied behind my back. So I think that compared to the average salmon fisherman, we have learned to dial and tweak those kings and get them to hit patterns that we're building on downriggers and with wire dipsies in just a 6-rod pattern, because that's what's reasonable for us to fish given the circumstances and the scenario that we're faced with. If we were in more of a open blue water situation elsewhere, where we're out over 3, 4, 5, 600 feet of water, would we handle that? Would we handle that differently? Yeah, I'm quite sure that I would still run a heavy downrigger pattern the way that I do, because we have figured out how to make that downrigger pattern work and work well on a daily basis. But at least in my interaction with other fishermen and seminars and clinics, that seems to be the sticking point for most fishermen. You see the guys that go out in their tin boats, the 18, 20 footers, they're running 2 downriggers, so those go on a pretty regular basis because they're spread. But you see everybody in the charter industry dropping to 2 riggers or 3 riggers, and back in the old days, I'm sure you can remember, guys were running 5, 6 downriggers on the back of the boat. Now it seems like that's not happening. A lot of the boats are going to these other techniques of getting the baits out in front of kings. And as well as I do, kings love to hunt in that solitary position as well. I mean, a bait out on a copper, 500 or 600 on a copper. I mean, that king, they're notorious. They're going to come in, swim, track that bait, boom, they're going to hit it. The more of those scenarios you can present, I think the more king strikes you're going to encounter. It's just for us and where we're located and how we fish. It's not that we don't want to run that stuff. It's just not practical for what we do.
Oh, you're so right. It's funny how like you said, things are just different in different areas. I have a charter boat here out of Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and we got a new one last year, a different one, I should say, and we put 1 downrigger on it. I'm a board advocate. I've been a board advocate for 15 years now. I came and fished Wilson, and it was a 6-rod tournament, and we trolled around 5 boards and a wire dipsy, and people looked at us funny. But it's different, and that I will say for sure. Like I know Wilson's even different than where you're at, but Lake Ontario still has some color to the water, which you guys are very blessed and lucky with that, and I'm thankful that you guys do. Lake Erie, the Lake Ontario's interaction with Lake Erie helps you guys have some color yet in the water. And what I mean by that for people at home is you have some color to your water. It's not crystal clear blue, sea down 40 feet on an average day. Here out of the port of Sheboygan, and you go out in the middle of June, it's flat calm, you go out to 100 foot of water, you can see your downrigger ball 30 plus feet down. So for us, downriggers, it's not that they don't work, they just aren't as productive if the fish are up higher in the water column. And on the Wisconsin side of Lake Michigan, with the prevailing westerly winds throughout the summer, the water is cooler and our fish are up higher, generally speaking. So if your board game isn't good, you're probably going to struggle. Where, again, like you said, where you're at, downriggers and wire dipsies are going to be your home runs. So the key to this deal is, if you want to be really good at salmon fishing, regardless if you fish Lake Michigan, Lake Ontario. As this thing evolves and has evolved for 40 years, you just better be willing to do what we talked about in the beginning, which is adapt. And he who
Yeah.
adapts will be very successful and will be, will enjoy the fishery over the years. You better know how to fish downriggers. Better be able to put some of these wingers in your program if you're going to fish that area where you are. Better be able to fish wire dipsies. You better know how to fish planer boards if you're going to fish out in the blue water. You got to be able to run all this different stuff. And one of the things that fishermen at home are blessed with today is they have the opportunity to jump on a website called YouTube and watch Russell's Fishing Tech videos or Bill Saiff outdoor videos. And you're 100% right. There's nothing better than actually going out on the water and doing it. But the one thing about living in Lake Ontario region or Lake Michigan region is you got 6 months to sit at home where it's frozen outside, and you can learn a ton of things from your comfy living room chair in your 70-degree living room, just watching these videos. So we're blessed to be able to do this. They're blessed to be able to watch this stuff. And Bill, we could talk for hours, and this is probably the longest podcast we've had so far. And I want to thank you. I want to say, I really appreciate you taking the time today to come on with us. But also, believe it or not, I want to just thank you for taking the time to put out, the videos and the information, because even though my average customer who walks in my store here in Sheboygan, Wisconsin on a daily basis isn't fishing Lake Ontario, you're selling product for me. And that's important. I have customers specifically come in, and I know instantly whose video they watched by what they went to the wall and grabbed. And while not everything that you're using there works here, just like not everything that I talk about here works there, there's obvious overlap. And, thank you for taking the time to put that stuff together. It's not only appealing to me and my customers, but I think it's obviously appealing to everybody all over the Great Lakes. And I want to wish you a good fishing season, but also a safe season for you and all your boats. And real quickly before we hop off, why don't you tell people how to find you on your website if they're interested in booking a trip, and then just give them the name of your YouTube page if they want to jump on and watch some of your stuff.
Well, you can find us on YouTube at Bill Saiff Outdoors, and that's spelled Saiff, Bill Saiff Outdoors. Same thing with the website. It's www.billsaiffoutdoors.com. You can email us at info@billsaiffoutdoors.com. We're going to continue to do this. I've got 4 or 5 more videos that are still in the can from last fall and last summer that we haven't edited, we haven't put up. We're going to head to Brown Trout Lodge here, within the week. And as soon as we hit the water there, we're going to be talking about, color patterns and early April selections and what we're doing to be successful on brown trout there. As we get back up here to Henderson this year, we're looking forward to putting, some of the salmon candy flashers that you produce, building those into our patterns and utilizing that stuff. So I'm sure that you're going to see that stuff in upcoming BSO videos as well. And we're looking forward to that. And we've got some good stuff on the horizon. And people can always reach out to me if you call me. At our phone number, it's 315-771-3514. If you call and we don't answer, it's just because we're handling fish with a customer. Don't be afraid. That's our personal number. Shoot us a text, and we will see that, and we'll get right back to you as quickly as we can. And we're pretty good about responding to everybody and trying to answer those questions. And the other thing is, if you got viewers that are watching this podcast, if there's something that you want to see in that video series, or you want something to get handled in a certain way, or there's questions about techniques or methodology, times a year, variations to this pattern building that Russ and I are talking about, shoot that in an email or a text, because that's the impetus for a lot of our videos comes from the questions that people are asking me behind the scenes, and then we'll try to handle that, and we'll try to roll that into the series so that the things you're most interested in are the things that we're going to handle in the video series.
Awesome. Well, this is Russell Gahagan from Russell's Fishing Tech. This is another episode of the Morning Buzz. Our guest today, Bill Saiff III from Bill Saiff Outdoors. Thanks again one more time, and we'll see you next week with another guest.